Hi friends, welcome to the Plane Fun RC channel. I'm your host, Saul, and we're starting up on part 2 of the Kyosho Phantom biplane build. We're going to focus on the aspects of the fuselage. Let's show you where we are with regard to the instruction manual, and I'll show you the other parts for the build on the fuselage. We're starting off with our tail wheel assembly here on the rear portion of our aircraft, and you can see how the tail wheel wire goes through this little stopper right here and is held in place with a little wheel collar, if you will. And then once we get that in place, we'll go ahead, we'll bend the wire, and then we'll go ahead and we will mount our rudder. And let me bring you here to the fuselage just to show you the parts individually. First of all, you can see that we have the hole for the tail wheel stoppers already pre-drilled, as you can see right there. And then down here we have our parts as well. There's our stopper that we're going to be using that the tail wheel gets inserted into. And then, of course, there's our tail wheel assembly with the wheel collar to hold it in place. All right, let's get our stopper glued in place and more to come. All right, friends, we put our 90-degree bend here in the wire for the tail wheel. It's supposed to be 15 millimeters down. It's a little longer than what it needs to be, but that's okay because you can see the tail wheel moves up and down, so we'll make the necessary adjustment. All right, let's get our rudder on and more to come. All right, friends, the rudder's in place. We're going to let that dry, and now we're going to move on to getting the elevator and the horizontal stabilizer in place. More to come. All right, now let's go ahead and get our horizontal stabilizer installed along with our elevators. Let me show you what we're going to be doing here by looking at the instructions. You can see the first part's pretty straightforward. We need to go ahead and cut away a portion of the film. Now, before we cut away the film, really what we want to do is we want to position it correctly first. And we want to measure it from side to side on each side of the fuselage. As you can see here, make sure it's even on both sides. And then we want to make sure that it's also evenly spaced in relation to the top cabin, as you can see here. And then, of course, also evenly spaced with regards to the top cabin this way, and also the wings as well. Make sure it's nice and level. And then we can go ahead and mark off the area where the covering needs to be removed. Take the covering off and then go ahead and glue it back in place. All right, more to come. All right, friends, we've got our horizontal stabilizer just temporarily in place. We've gone ahead, we've checked our measurements from here to here, and also from the same side here to make sure it's equal distance from the fuselage. But then we also went ahead and measured from this point here all the way to the top of the cabin right there, as you can see where I'm pointing at. And we did that on both sides. We did that over here as well to make sure we're equal distance. And then we took a moment to look at it in relation to the actual wings to see if it's level, and it is. So now we've gone ahead, we've marked off where our covering's going to be. We just take a little pencil going along here on both sides, on the top and the bottom. And now we'll go ahead and slide the elevator out and trim off the covering, put it back in place, and epoxy it. More to come. All right, friends, we have our elevators mounted, so we'll let the glue dry for the CA hinges. We're going to shift our focus now to mounting the motor. Let's talk about what we're going to do there. So once again, we're going to be using our wonderful Electrifly Power Systems brushless motor mount. It's a wonderful motor mount, very easy to use, easy to mount, and fully adjustable. Really like it a lot. Excellent motor mount. Our power system that we're going to be using is the Avian motors. These are the newer motors from Spectrum. They're not really new. They're just the rimfire motors rebranded for Spectrum, and this is the equivalent of a 60 size nitro motor, which is what this plane would use. So we'll go ahead and we will mount that on the plane. All right, friends, let's get started with the mounting. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, we are getting ready to mount the motor. Let's talk about what we're going to be doing here. First and foremost, we have one of the nice things I love about these brushless motor mounts is on the back of the package is an actual pattern that can be put right on the firewall. And you can see there's even center lines here. And when we look at the firewall here, we can see there's already center lines molded into the actual fiberglass, which is going to make things a lot easier. So we're going to take a moment. We're going to cut this out, and this pattern matches the motor mount perfectly. So we'll cut it out, we'll tape it to the front of the firewall, and we'll drill the holes. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update here, we're mounting the motor. Let's talk about what we have going on here. So the motor is offset. So keep that in mind when you're doing it, and the instruction manual provides greater detail on this, but let me just explain. So the motor's offset because what that does is that it's offset to the left, so that way it will provide right thrust. Now, there's a pattern, let me show it to you here. There's a pattern here that comes with the motor. And what we've done is you can see the center lines that are here, 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 and here. These were already molded into the fiberglass. So the only way you're gonna mount this is using an X mount. Now, I know I mentioned a second ago, we were gonna be using the Great Plains motor mount. That will not work because the distance from the firewall to the, show you here, the back plate here of the motor, supposed to be 123 millimeters. It was too far away from the firewall. So therefore, we are going to just go ahead and use some standoffs put behind the actual X mount itself. So we've gone ahead, we've taped on our template here. We also went ahead and taped on the actual X mount that's going to go in the back of the motor. And that gave us, allows us to go ahead and to properly drill the holes accordingly. So let's go ahead. We're gonna put blind nuts behind the firewall, get that in place, put our standoffs on, and mount our motor. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, let me pass along a helpful tip. One of the reasons I started the channel is to help pass along helpful tips. So when you have a plane where the firewall is way far ahead, beyond where your hands can reach, and you've got to put in blind nuts. This is where having a magnet, an extendable magnet, which you can find these easily online on Amazon, comes in very handy. What you do is you take the magnet, and there's your blind nut, and simply go through, boom, attaches to it, okay? We're gonna flip that around because that's in the wrong direction. So it sits like this, and then you'll simply take your blind nut using your extendable magnet, and it just fits all the way forward. And then with one hand holding the magnet, you then take, on the front portion, you'll then take your socket head, tighten it down to help pull the blind nut in place. All right, helpful tip, more to come. All right, friends, you can see we've got our motor mounted. And this is what I love the most when you're making your own mounts. Look at the distance from the front of the cowling to this back plate here, and it's perfect. I mean, you could not ask for anything better than that. That is an excellent spacing right there. So that's perfect. And now we're looking at it from the front, and you can see it is sitting almost dead center in the cowling. So that's wonderful. Very, very happy about that. Let me show you what we did here. So I can gently take the cowling off without dumping the plane. There we go. Now I just have 3 bolts right now. I realize I have to get a 4th, but I was at the hardware store picking up a couple things to mount the motor, and a very astute sales associate recommended K&S metals. And for those that have been in the hobby for a long time, you're familiar with K&S. If not, K&S has been around for a very long time, and he recommended stainless steel tube, which is perfect. It's a brilliant idea because really you can then go through and custom make your own lengths, which I did here. And these were 62 millimeters long, and that gives us the exact spacing from the front of the firewall to the front of the back plate here of 123 millimeters. Perfect. So we just need to order up a 4th bolt for there, and then the engine mount is done, and then we'll shift our focus to getting our ESC mounted, and we've got to go ahead and cut an opening in the fuselage to be able to go ahead and access the battery tray. All right, we're coming along in grand style. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue with our update here, you can see we've got our servo tray ready to go. We've got our rudder servo here and elevator servo here. 13 millimeters from the center is what you're looking for. That's why you see the 2 larger holes here. These have been increased to 440. And then, of course, this is just 13 millimeters from the center of the servo to the outermost hole right here for the high-tech servo. And then, of course, here's our plans here. You can see how it's constructed. We've got some additional supports here on the side, and then some plywood supports here that are represented here on the servo tray for additional support for the mounts for the servos themselves. Okay, let's go ahead. We're going to get it mounted into the plane and more to come. All right, friends, you can see we've got our servo tray installed. A couple things to keep in mind. Let me swing around this side here. First and foremost, you want to make sure that the tray does not drop all the way down. If you look carefully, you'll see down in there where the fiberglass changes shape, where it just goes from a 90 degree to about a 45 degree. You want to bring it so it's above that line. So keep that in mind. It's also, the tray is going to be 30 millimeters from that former back in there, and you can see the marks there on the side. Let me come over here and show you real quick. So you can see the marks there. You can see how the tray sits in line with that, pretty close to it. You're going to want to make sure you put epoxy both on the top and the bottom of the tray, okay? And also try to make sure the tray is even. Make sure it's not tilted one way or the other. That's the important thing to keep in mind, okay? And the reason for that is because the exit points for the push rods and the pull for the rudder come out right in this area in here where I'm pointing at, where I'm pointing the camera at. So right, hang on, right here is where they come out of. So just keep that in mind. All right, we're in the process of getting our control horns in place. Then we're going to go ahead and get our push rods in place and our pull and get that all taken care of. And then we'll get our radio installed. Now, I will say one thing. Right there where you see the Velcro strap, that's where your receiver is going to go. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, friends, more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update here, let's talk about what we've got going on. So a couple things. First of all, we're working on the pull, as you can see here. So we've got that situated. We've got our control horns in place. And we also have our holes opened up for our push rod and our pull. Now, I want to talk to you very quickly about the horn here for the rudder. Now, when we look at the instructions here for the actual plane, let me go back one page here. You'll see that it gives you a height, a certain height above the base of the rudder, and you can see it right there. Where it needs to sit. So in this case, here's the base of the rudder, and it needs to be 10 millimeters. Don't use 10 millimeters at all. If you do, you'll wind up hitting the wire that is inserted into the rudder here for the tail wheel. So what we did, coming over here with the ruler, let me show you what our measurement is. From the base of the rudder, you can see it's approximately about 25 millimeters, roughly. About 25 millimeters, okay? So keep that in mind. That's very important. Plus, look at the horn and look at it in relation to the actual exit. And the exit is that little tube right there. The exit where the pull wire comes out. Notice how it's in line. That's very important. Very important when you are doing pull. You've got to make sure that the control horn is in line with the exit, because what you want is that wire to run perfectly straight from the actual horn itself all the way to the servo. You don't want it to have to angling or anything of that nature. That can affect the movement of the surface and potentially affect how much torque is applied to the surface as well. The other measurements here for the hole for the pull and the hole for the elevators, that is correct. That is correct. So the only measurement you have to change, once again, is just going from the base of the rudder to the actual opening that needs to be drilled. All right, we're going to finish our pull and more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, you can see that our pull is working great. Went together very easy. No problems whatsoever. The only thing we had to do with the pull was to go through and to trim the horn itself because it was rubbing against the cable, as you can see. So we had to do that. So, but outside of that, it's working fine. We're going to go ahead and shift our focus now to getting our push rods in place. And let me show you where we are on the instructions right here. There we go. You can see what we're going to be working on next and how we're going to be going through and assembling our push rod for the elevators. All right, friends, more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update here, let's go ahead and dive deeper into creating the push rods for the Kyosho Phantom. So let me show you, as I did just a second ago, the plans, and I've given these, taken the opportunity to really go and look at these thoroughly. So you can see what we need to do is we need to drill a hole 2 millimeters. We need to create a groove so the push rod sits flush. The only thing that they don't show is how far up that hole's supposed to be drilled. So as a point of reference, I decided to go ahead and use the heat shrink that comes with it. I slid it over the rod, I marked it off, and we're going to drill a hole just a little bit before that mark, like right about in this area here. And we'll start with that first. We're going to make 2 rods. Okay, 2 rods rather than just one. You can see on the plans here, the idea is to make 1 rod with 2 ends that go to the actual elevator. I'm not a fan of that, and I'll tell you why. When we come over here, you can see the elevator servo there on the left. That one right there, okay? That's where the push rod would sit. Now, my experience, after having created one previously for the Great Plains GB, which you can see sitting right there, is that the elevator push rod, when using elevator servo, when using that type of push rod, would sit in the center. Well, we can't put it in the center because we have the rudder servo right there, as you can see. So what I did is I did add another elevator servo right there. So we're going to create 2 push rods. And I think that'll work a lot better. And if it doesn't, well, then we'll stay with the 1 push rod. No big deal. All right, let's go ahead. Let's start our process of creating our push rods. More to come. All right, friends, let's talk push rods. So you can see we've got our push rod assembled here. Let's talk about measurements. That's the important thing. So I want to take a moment to go ahead and show you something. So you can see here we've got our hole drilled. Now, the hole itself is measured 41 millimeters from here to here. Okay, 41 millimeters. That seems to be perfect. And that's at both ends, as you can see. You're drilling a 2 millimeter hole here. And what we did is, you can see the groove that we created there, okay? And the way we did it is we took a Dremel. This is a cutting wheel, but you'll notice it's thicker than your average cutting wheel, as you can see. And that made a perfect groove for this to fit in. Now, it's not going to sit completely flush, as you can see from the side, but that's okay. That's okay. You want it that way because the heat shrink will then be able to really hold that in place and keep that from moving. So just, along with the CA glue, you're going to CA the push rod in place. Okay, one other thing I want to mention to you as well. We're going to look at the end here. You can see we have a bend here. It's a bend, a slight bend going out and then bend going in. That's where the exit point is going to be. And the way I can't give you a specific measurement because ultimately it depends upon where you drilled the hole for the push rod to exit for the elevator. What I did is I put the push rod in the fuselage, found out where it came out, and then marked that off, and that's where I went ahead and did the bend. It's a slight bend. You don't need much. But this end should be in direct line with the control horn. So keep that in mind, okay? Just keep that in mind. Okay, we're going to go ahead. We're going to CA this push rod in place, put our heat shrink on, and let's see how she works. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update here, we've got our push rod working. Yay! You can see it in there working really good. Everything's great. All right. We're gonna do the other side, and more to come. All right. right, friends, as we continue our update here, I thought I'd take a moment to go into a little bit more detail of how we do the push rod. So as you can see here, we have our push rod, and you can see where I've gone ahead and I've drilled the hole. Now, remember now, the hole is 41 millimeters from the end of the rod itself, so just keep that in mind. What I did then is once I drilled it says 2 millimeter, but actually I find 2.5 is perfect. We're using a 256 rod, and the bend, as you can see, is the distance from the hole to the line here. Remember, this line represents the actual heat shrink itself, where it's going to sit. We don't want the hole all the way up here. We want it down a little bit, so this way the heat shrink, the heat shrink will go through and will fully contain or keep in place the actual push rod itself. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, so once you've drilled the hole, you're also going to want to take your drill and drill it a little bit at an, not only would you drill straight down, but you're also going to want to drill at an angle. And the reason for that is because of the bend that's there in the wire itself, as you can see. So in order for this to sit flush, having that little curve at the top of the hole allows us to sit nice and flush, as you can see here. So just keep that in mind. Now, you'll notice what we also did after I got this in the hole, we drew a line, as you'll see right there, and that line represents the groove that is going to be cut into the actual dowel itself. So this rod will sit semi-flush, not completely flush, but semi-flush in the actual dowel itself. We're using, once again, as I mentioned before, a cutting tool bit, but notice how it's not particularly flat. It's a little bit thicker than your average cutting tool. And we're just going to take it and just work a groove. We're going to work a groove right into that hole right in there at real slow speed. Okay, so let's do that real quick. Make sure you're bracing it. And take your time. Make sure it stays in line. Make sure the cutting tool stays in line with the line itself. Anyway, you can see how we've gone ahead and we have begun with our initial groove, as you can see right there. So I'll continue doing this, get a nice groove in place, and then we'll continue from there. All right, more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update here, so we've got our groove cut. You can see it right there. Very nicely done. And what we did too, not only did we use the Dremel tool, but I'll show you a neat little trick. If you take a bamboo stick, a skewer stick, like you can find these in any food store, and you take a little adhesive sandpaper, you can see it right there on the actual skewer itself, and just wrap a little piece around. You can then take it after you've used your Dremel tool and just put it right in the groove and just sand back and forth, and it gives you a nice, smooth, even groove. And then that way you can then, at that point, your wire will just drop right in the hole like so, and in the actual groove itself. And you can see when we look at the wire, it's not quite completely flush, but it's just enough to where it'll give it something to hold on to, give it something to glue it in place, and then we'll use our heat shrink to help hold it in place. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our thin CA, or medium, pardon me, medium or thick CA will do fine. Have some kicker handy as well. We're going to take a little bit. We're going to go ahead and put it in the groove, like so. and a little bit in the hole. And then just take your rod, put it right in there. The excess will probably drip out the bottom. And then you can go ahead, you can glue it in place at that point. All right, now I realize I forgot to do something. I forgot to cut off the excess. There's a little too much rod here on the inside. I need to do that real quick. All right, friends, more to come. All right, friends, you can see we've got our heat shrink in place after we went ahead and glued our rod in place. So the push rod, at least on this end, this part's going to be going into the fuselage. That part is done. We just we're now going to go ahead and insert our push rod into the fuselage and determine exactly where on the end here we need to go ahead and make the bend. Remember, we're going to have a bend going this way and just a little bit this way, and then a bend going that way. So sort of like probably just maybe 10 degrees or something like that, not much. All right, let's go ahead and complete our push rod. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, I want to share with you a big no-no that I just discovered. And so you can see our push rods here, and you see our pull wire there. And the key thing is you don't want them to interact with each other. Well, when I looked all the way in the back there, let me see if I can zoom in back there the best I can. There we go. Notice how I made the big boo-boo of going through and some reason I'm having some difficulty zooming in here. You have to forgive me. Anyway, let me see if you can see it. You can see how the push rod wraps around the pull. That's bad. So I've got to take this push rod out here and put that in. And then, of course, the other one, as we're creating it, it also wraps around. So I've got to fix that as well. So just something to keep in mind whenever you're doing pull, make sure your other push rods are not interfering with the pull wire. All right, just a friendly tip. More to come. All right, friends, great news, great news, great news. We've got our push rods in place. Everything looks good. Everything's working great, as you can see. And they're unbound from the pull. And then, of course, you can see our control surfaces back here. They're moving, no problems whatsoever. Fantastic on all accounts. All right, that's it for the radio installation. We're going to go ahead and move on to getting our fuselage cut in this area here so we can go ahead and install our battery tray. So we're going to go ahead and do a part 3 of the build. So keep watching. Please like and subscribe. And thank you for watching Plane Fun RC. More to come.